Cody, all right. I got Cody Mac, Crude Oil with me. Cody's a pro wrestler, right? And he's a childhood friend of Cass, my business partner, and the co-founder of Kaks Inc. Cody, are you familiar with what Cass and I are doing right now with our business?
From my understanding, you guys are opening up a bar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's not that complicated. Cass and I are opening a bar, but the main thing out of it is we're going to move our podcast studio into the bar as we progress through the process here, because we take possession next week, and then we're going to construct for 3 months. And then once that's up, hopefully we're open by late January, early February. That's the point. It's a regular bar. We're going to have pub food, draft, like highballs, the whole 9 yards. But the thing is, like, the studio itself is going to be in the bar, because like I'm focusing on making this show like out of an actual bar here. The podcast alone it's basically like centers around lifestyle of Calgarians and Albertans primarily. So like I label it a lifestyle podcast, but obviously a lot of it will connect with my interests and hobbies. And like one of them is wrestling and combat sports period. Like I'm a huge combat sports fanatic. Like I love that whole realm. And then Cass told me, hey, I have a childhood friend named Cody, and you know, he got into wrestling, and I was like, oh, sweet. And then naturally my default was like, I'm like looking for you on like WWE and like AEW and everything. And then he's like, no, dude, he's in the regional circuit. And then that's when I think 2 years ago, I think it was right after COVID, I came to one of your shows at RCW, and I watched you wrestle, and like I had a blast, dude. Like it was like I recommend everyone like go check out RCW matches. Like they're on like almost every Friday, right?
Yeah, just about.
Okay, yeah, and it's out of the Legion in downtown Calgary. But right now, Cody, like, are you still wrestling for RCW, or do you bounce around right now?
So I have not worked an RCW show since June 24th.
Okay. So who are you with right now then?
Right now, I've only been wrestling for Pure Power Wrestling out of Lethbridge. Mm-hmm. I have worked one Canadian Wrestling Elite show here in Medicine Hat, where I got to wrestle Chris Masters.
Oh yeah.
Well, that was pretty
Chris
cool.
Chris Masters?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Man,
so,
my memories of him is from like, you know, back in the day with the Master Lock Challenge and everything like that.
He's a big guy too. Like, so when you see him on WWE TV, and even when he came back, you know, a little smaller after his wellness policy violation, like the guy is a legit 6'3", and like he is at least 240 pounds solid muscle still.
Yeah.
I think he goes by Chris Adonis in NWA. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was Chris Masters when I wrestled him, because obviously, you know, just be the persona you are when you were the most over, sell more tickets. But he's a really nice guy. I can't say enough good things about him. He actually reminded me a lot of Rene Dupree, who I got to know a little bit as well. He stayed at my house last fall, and both are very similar. They got into WWE very young. Some would say probably too young. I remember Rene Dupree. Yeah, he was. They're both not even 40 years old yet. Still,
Chris Masters isn't 40. Man, he seems like he's been around forever, just because of like just my memories. I mean, yeah, he would shake his titties and stuff like after like
I know. And stuff. I think Masters just turned 40, maybe, I think, but like they're still relatively young. Like they were in the WWE. Like Rene Dupree was like 19 when he first showed up in the Fed, and Masters was like 20 or 21. Mm-hmm. And they were like. They looked like full-grown ass men at that age. I remember when I was 19, I was still skinny. You know, I still looked like I was just out of high school. Like,
yeah, man. I remember Rene. He had that. He had this video where they're watching him do his bodybuilding routine, like at the peak of him, like getting super jacked. And maybe you can still find it on YouTube. But I remember watching as a kid, and you know, like he literally gets up in the middle of the night to like eat more calories and then hit the gym. And but he was like looking good back then. Like it was like you know, I think they were trying to groom him to roll in with like a physique that was almost as awesome as like Batista or whatever back then, and it did, you know, for a while there. But obviously you're a wrestler, so like that lifestyle, I always get confused when I see a really good physique. Because I'm like, how do you maintain that with the wrestling schedule? Because most bodybuilders, it's a bit of an illusion. Like to get that look, you actually have to live kind of lazy. You just train, eat, sleep, not travel and interrupt your all that. But Yeah, I'm interested to hear about that because you live that lifestyle, you know. So like, tell me about your fitness routine. How do you guys stay in shape and find time to work out and all that?
Well, let's see here. I've always been into weightlifting. I started weightlifting when I was 14 in high school. I'd go to the gym at lunchtime, and I remember in grade 9, I did put on some muscle. When you're that age, especially if you're already an athlete and you're, I guess you can say, a little bit more of a genetically developed person, your body can handle a little bit more strenuous physical activity. And like, I kind of surprised myself in grade 9, but I kept that up all through high school, mostly for basketball training. When I got out of high school, that's when I started bodybuilding. And you actually can even ask Cass himself. I used to take him to the gym and whip him into shape. And he'll tell you, like, it's no joke. Like, I take it pretty serious. And, like, we've followed a program and everything out of a book. I think he bought the book first, and then I ended up getting it after him. But I can't remember. But we had followed a program out of it. Consistency is the one thing they can't sell you on. Maybe a personal trainer could, but that's what a personal trainer gets paid for, is to keep people consistent. And it isn't for the knowledge in his head, because all the knowledge in his head is readily available all over the internet, all over forums, all over books. Like, all you need is Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, and it teaches you everything you need to know.
Yeah, the Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, right? Yeah, I bought that same one.
I love that book. And I've got it too. The thing is it's consistency. So I've had ups and downs in my life, and there was a point I wasn't going to the gym, I wasn't eating right, and I got fat, and I got out of shape, and I got, all that. And I actually got back into shape with martial arts. I took martial arts first before getting into pro wrestling.
Man, dude, we have so much in common. I'm a huge
martial
arts guy. What did you train?
So I studied under a guy named Gary Braniff at Energy Lake System of Martial Arts.
Okay.
And I made it all the way up to blue belt in his program. And his program only had, after blue belt, brown and black. You had to earn your white belt. And it's full range, like jiu-jitsu, striking, grappling, all of it.
Is basically, would you say it's MMA essentially?
It is. It's just, so, the whole concept of mixed martial arts started essentially with the UFC. And it was to weed out all of the bullshit. Well, bullshito artists they call them, but it was to weed out all the bullshit and all the hokey pokey fucking, I can beat you without touching you crap, right?
Yeah.
And obviously everyone saw jiu-jitsu was kind of what really got it done in the end with Royce Gracie and all
back
that.
Back then.
Right. And it was always to compare what style works. So my trainer did start out kind of basing everything on Kung Fu, Wing Chun, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he only is taking what works and applying it to an MMA game, essentially, because, MMA exposed a ton of martial arts and a lot of martial arts weaknesses and a lot of their faults. And when it comes to mixed martial arts, having that well-rounded game, like MMA itself is a discipline now because of that. It's important to remember the origins of things. So like I said, there's a lot of Wing Chun and Kung Fu principles, especially when testing for belts. He still believes in a lot of formation or kata. And then, but they're like, I'm on the blue belt level going into brown belt, which is all grappling and jiu-jitsu. So the moment I go back, I'm going to get turned into a pretzel. The biggest thing, though, that he teaches that I think a lot of trainers out there miss the mark on is how to put it all together and how to identify. I don't want to say, to know when your opponent's going to attack before they do, but there's certain cues that you can be taught and certain things for body language that can definitely reveal kind of what your opponent's thinking away, and then you can act accordingly in your own offense. So, and he teaches, you'd be surprised how valuable knowing the difference between left and right is in fighting.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of that whipped me back into shape. A lot of lifestyle changes. So like I don't really drink much anymore. I don't use drugs.
What period did you get out of shape, Cody? Because I mean, every photo I ever seen you, what Cass always told me, it was always like, this guy's an Adonis, man.
So it was, let's see here, from 2013 until 2017.
Oh, geez, you took that long of a little break kind of thing?
Yeah, like I would go to the gym here or there. Like early 2013, I was going to the gym solid, and I was in pretty good shape and lifting heavy weight and stuff. My cardio never was really that good until I got into martial arts, and then until I got into wrestling. My endurance and my cardio wasn't the best. Now it's way better. It has to be. But then, yeah, like I did start going to martial arts end of 2015, but I didn't take it super serious at first. And then I woke up one day and I couldn't get out of bed, and my stomach was in knots and all that. And, I've been hitting the sauce way too much. And I was up front with the doctor, and he just flat out said, "Hey man, there's nothing we can really do. You got to cut back." And I just kind of quit at that point, because I said, it's not worth it. It's more valuable to me to be in shape and attain my fitness goals. And, then I decided right then and there, I'm like, well, why not be a wrestler? I feel like I'm going to regret not trying at least. So I was actually at that point, I was under 200 pounds. I was like one of the leanest, but also skinniest I've been in years, because I lost a ton of weight being sick. And I had to eat smaller meals at first and all this. So I was like probably 190 pounds, but I was in good shape. I was lean enough. And then when I decided to get into wrestling training, I went up north and I started bulking up there, because I was under the impression that I was going to be, maybe a medium-sized guy in my wrestling training. And I'm like, well, at least if I can be as strong as possible, I'll have a better chance. And it turned out I was like the biggest guy in my class, like the most muscular guy. I wasn't in like the best overall shape, but I was the strongest and the biggest guy for sure. And it was kind of an eye opener as to the kind of people that are getting involved in wrestling these days. I put on some weight. I bulked up. I wasn't the leanest. I learned in wrestling training, my cardio was shit. I would gas after like a 15-minute match or a 10-minute training match. Like it's hard to be a wrestler. We'll get into that later, but then I started taking my cardio and my endurance a lot more serious. And that's when I noticed a lot of changes, as well as my diet and my supplementation. So now I weigh anywhere between 200 and 210 pounds, depending on water and other factors. But I'm like lean, and I'm the strongest I've ever been. And I have the best endurance and the best cardio I've ever had. I never really thought I would be in this good a shape at 34.
Right.
So, but I'm in literally the best shape of my life right now. And a lot of it, you keep the mentality as well. You keep your mentality strong. And if you just kind of always have that always ready mentality, then, the body follows, and it doesn't really stray too far away from getting out of shape if you take a week or two off. But I try to stay as consistent as possible.
Okay. So right now, like, to go back to cause like I never, fully understood the lifestyle scope of a wrestler. I just love watching the end result. Right. But again, when people tell me that they're on the roads, like 7 days a week, 6 days a week, I'm thinking, like, take me through an actual routine week. Cause if you're traveling, when do you eat? When do you train? Do you find like a local gym? Like if you're trying to keep muscle on, you got to find heavy weight somewhere. And if you're in a crappy hotel gym, you can't do your bulking. Right. Like it's always been a mystery to me, from a fan standpoint, how these guys stay in that kind of shape. Like just shed some light on that. Like right, you're talking about the consistency. So give me like a sample week, and
for sure.
Let me learn. Let's hear about this.
Okay, so I guess a bit of a disclaimer: if you already are an athlete before you become a wrestler, you have a way better advantage than all the other people who were not an athlete before becoming a wrestler. On the local circuit or the independent circuit, more people than not were not an athlete before they became a wrestler. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, those who were an athlete, and especially like an elite athlete, are the ones that make it further because they have the background and the base to the foundation to go off of. So like I said, I've always been involved in weightlifting and sports. I was an athlete before becoming a pro wrestler.
What'd you play in high school?
Pardon?
What sports did you do in high school?
So I did basketball predominantly. I did join the wrestling team in junior high. I was on the wrestling team for like a brief 5 minutes in high school. I liked basketball more. I liked how fast paced it was. Honestly, like, I don't know. I should have stuck with wrestling in hindsight. But like wrestling's always there. And my school wasn't a big wrestling school either.
Are you from Calgary, Cody? You're from Calgary, right?
Yeah, I went to Chestermere High School.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah, so I'm Rocky View, right? Yeah, and the football team wanted me, but I didn't like the coach. The coach was just this big, fat, lazy dude, and I don't really have a lot of respect for big, fat, lazy people who bark orders to guys who are in better shape than them. But that's just me. Yeah. So on the road, it is hard. Yeah. It is hard to maintain, okay? Just to maintain, let alone try to get gains, okay?
Yeah.
A lot of wrestlers make their gains when they're not on the road a lot. A lot of wrestlers get into better shape when they're not on the road a lot. The road takes its toll. I've never traveled 7 days a week wrestling yet, but I've done like 4 or 5 days a week. And like at one point I was wrestling 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And traveling all over Alberta to do it. And it's tough. And it's harder in Canada than it is in the States to travel. And there's a huge reason for that is because we have all this land and all these open roads and all this big wide space and not a lot of people in between it. It's 3 hours from Calgary to Edmonton. There's one town you hit in between, Red Deer, that may have wrestling. Other than that, you don't get any wrestling, no towns that'll have a promotion and a promoter running for you to go work for in between Calgary and Edmonton. In the States, in that same 3 hour span, in that same distance between Calgary and Edmonton, you could hit 5 major cities that each have at least 2 to 5 promotions in them to go work for, all who like have some kind of way to get their platform out beyond the walls of that city. So the traveling in Canada is really hard for that reason. The only thing I can say is you have to just do what you can. So if that means you get lettuce wrapped chicken burgers from A&W to maintain your diet, like to not carb up too much and not, get too much shit in you, that's what you got to do. I've done it before. And I've traveled with other wrestlers, Ring of Honor world champion Matt Taven. That's what he was doing on the road when I was with him. Same with Moose, who was the former Impact world champion. I rode with him for a little bit. Same thing. He actually had a meal prep company and he took his meals with him, but he had a list of things he could buy on the road too if he needed. It's literally a matter of just do whatever the hell you can and try not to make as many excuses and try not to get hurt.
Yeah.
Because it's injuries that really screw you up. I was going pretty solid for like 3 months in 2019. I was working out like 5 days a week and I was on a roll and I was making all these gains and my physique was changing. And then I screwed up my shoulder and that took that out of the equation for like, oh man, I didn't get back into the gym after that until like at least 6 months after that. And even then I still couldn't stay in the gym because I hurt my other shoulder and then I hurt it again in the gym. And then I went up north to work and then, that was at the start of the pandemic. And, I was able to sort of inadvertently rehab my shoulder up there, but they closed the gyms up there. So I couldn't go to the gym. And then I didn't go to I haven't really gone to the gym to lift weights a lot until this year. And this year I've been able to stay injury free enough and actually make a lot of gains and a lot of strength gains, a lot of physique gains. And part of it is because I'm not wrestling 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm not training 3 days a week either. Like that's the other thing too. So on my level, if you're not training somewhere, then you are just a weekend warrior and you're going nowhere. Sorry. And there's a lot of guys I wrestle with. There's one guy, that lives here in town in particular. He's just a weekend warrior. he's like about my height, maybe an inch or two taller, but he's skinny fat. Like he doesn't have any muscle on him.
Yeah.
I wrestled him for the chance to wrestle Chris Masters, and he actually hurt his knee wrestling me by just running at me.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff happens from not lifting weights.
Yeah.
And anyone that gets into this business that thinks that you can do this and not lift weights and not have any kind of external resistance applied to you, you're a fool. You will get hurt quicker than you ever thought possible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Like it's like, or you have to modify your style to accommodate your, I mean, because towards the end, like when Roddy Piper came out and did those rare matches where he was way over the hill, you know, like just, I'm already observing, I'm like, hey, there's no way he's going to take too many bumps because physically you can see like one of these is going to, you know, like, I mean, his shoulder, no muscle around it anymore. I'm like, you land on that shoulder, then you're going to be super injured and whatnot. You know, but then that's why I have all the respect in the world to like Ric Flair, like geez, 73 on still training, still you know, doing his thing. And I don't know. Did you see his last match?
Some of it. And the thing is like, see, so that right there, like he shouldn't have done that. But this industry becomes addictive. And if you're already kind of like have an addictive personality, like Ric Flair, who, you know, everyone knows about his drinking, and a lot of people are still surprised that he's still alive. But the guy almost like passed out in that last match because he was dehydrated. Like he wasn't physically ready for his supposed last match.
Yeah.
Like my trainer, Lance Storm, said it best. He's like, it's not easy just to be a normal average wrestler still. Like you can get into wrestling and you can be a terrible wrestler and you can probably have a relatively easy time doing it. But to be just like a passable wrestler, at least it requires quite a bit of work and it requires a decent amount of skill and athleticism. And it requires you to be in pretty good physical condition. And Ric Flair at 70, whatever he is, I'm sorry, like he would have been better off just being like at ringside in his suit, doing his Ric Flair antics, being involved in a spot in the match. But they, you know what I mean? Like to have him in it and like, you know, another example I won't forget is Jake the Snake Roberts. He had one spot on an All Elite Wrestling show. I don't know, it was earlier this year or it was last year or something. Yeah. And he was literally sitting on the side of the ring after his spot with an oxygen mask because he couldn't breathe. And he was in the ring for like 2 minutes. Like, it's not easy, man.
I absolutely get that. I think with Rick, it's like, again, like I'm not a wrestler, I'm a fan, but I'm a fan of a variety of combat sports, but Ric Flair is more like a symbol now, you know, it doesn't really matter that he can't go like even remotely, do it like, you know, in a, you know, great way. It's just when he rolls out, like just that warm feeling the fans get. Like, I mean, this last WrestleMania, I was in the I honestly lost track of a lot of wrestling at that point because I'm more of a 90s guy. Like we're about similar age here, Cody, and like I love the 90s wrestling. Like that was the era I grew up, just couldn't get enough of it. Like Shawn Michaels, DX, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, like that era. But when I saw Stone Cold come out and do his match with Kevin Owens, like it just I'm like, this is why I love wrestling. It just the characters they create this this energy that you just it's like for you seeing a superhero, you know. So it doesn't even matter if whether or not they fight well or whatever. It's like as long as I saw Ric Flair do a couple chops and, you know, like kind of get the crowd going.
Sure.
It gave me as a fan, like I would pay money for that. Now I get from your standpoint, like actual wrestlers who creating that art, it is kind of like silly to see this guys like, you know, like because you're supposed to simulate a really cool fight scene, right? And then it's like it's at the same time like it has to be somewhat like we know it's an orchestrated fight scene, but still it has to look like an actual fight scene, you know, like so that's when I'm a little bit like, okay, like I if it wasn't Ric Flair, some other old guy could not pull that off, you know, to have people care, right? You know, Ric Flair, it's more like he's a symbol now, you know, like he's transcended
for sure. Like, okay, so sorry to cut you off, but like you're right. Ric Flair gets a pass.
Yeah.
Ric Flair gets a pass because he is considered one of, if not the greatest of all time. And he has done so much for the industry. Like, it's just, the thing is there's the entertainment aspect, and then there is the actual, like, integrity of the business, okay?
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't mix. So when I see a guy like Ric Flair literally geared up at 70 whatever, barely ready, I think to myself, he's not abiding by what helped make him famous in the first place, which is the concept in wrestling of hiding your weaknesses and what's the word I'm looking for? Exaggerating your strengths.
Yeah.
So, Ric Flair was never the most technical wrestler, but he had oodles of charisma. He could cut, like the best promo. He could get the fans super invested.
Yeah.
But he never really had, like, every Ric Flair match is kind of the same, at least for what he does in his matches, whether he was wrestling Ricky Steamboat or Hulk Hogan or Bret Hart or, someone in Japan or someone in Mexico. It didn't matter. Ric Flair does what Ric Flair does, but it's because it always worked, and he was able to always generate, like, interest in the people and reel the people in. Mm-hmm. He could have, in his last match, done all of that stuff and not really been an actual competitor in the match where he has to have all the spotlight that much on him. He could have been at ringside, like he could have been like, someone's right-hand man, all that stuff. So I look at this and I go, okay, Rick can't stay away. Rick wants one last shot. Like, there are lots of fans that want to see him, but when I see him get in there and he does more than he should to the point of where he's like almost gonna pass out from dehydration in the middle of the match, to me that's like, okay, that's not utilizing him the best possible way, and it's sacrificing his own personal health to give fans more than what they didn't need. Because just as you said, you love seeing him whip those chops and do the woos and the strut and everything. He didn't need to get into wrestling gear to do any of that. He could have been in his suit doing it, and he could have had a lot more fun and showcased himself a lot more than being involved in a tag match where it's like, okay, now you got to remember however many spots you got to be at this point at this certain time. You got to be there for this guy. You got to make sure you don't hurt this guy. You got to, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, what can you do, Rick? You're not exactly a spring chicken anymore. So now you're limiting the guys you're working with, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's that fine line between giving the fans what they want versus, okay, letting it be and remembering the good times. So in the case of Stone Cold Steve Austin, I don't even know why they advertised that as a match, because he just came out and gave Kevin Owens a stunner, and that was it.
Yeah, he came out in shorts too. He wasn't in his full gear. It was more like a street fight. Like, it's almost like, but again, like we have a different enjoyment or vantage point of this topic, because you're the performer doing the art. You're in there. Like me, I'm the fan. And but at the same time, I'm more than a regular fan, because I really want to understand what you guys do. Like, part of me as a kid fantasized about being a wrestler and stuff. I just never full on took the plunge, But I did train a bunch of martial arts and stuff too. But I just remember Stone Cold, like, just the way it came off to me. His match was kind of like, hey, I'm retired, kid. Stop mocking me. And then it's kind of like, all right, I had enough. I'm coming out now. Like, that was the vibe I got. It's almost like watching your dad be like, all right, put his beard down and go beat up this other guy in the bar.
Yeah.
That's why everyone's just like riled up. It's like, oh man, like Kevin Owens did, he pissed him off far enough. Like, he's literally coming out to kick your ass. Like whether or not you could do it or not, it's just, that's just the storyline in my head as a fan, why I lost my mind. Like, I was just like, this is freaking awesome. I think the timing was perfect. Like, 20 years later, he's supposed to never wrestle again because he can injure his neck. But then he comes out just like, I don't care. I'm going to smack this guy around, and then it was great to see him do the stunners. But yeah, it was, I don't know what it was, man. It was magic for me, but
I'm not disagreeing with you. It is magic. I guess it's just, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, man, it kind of happened too late. Stone Cold, believe it or not, is technically in good enough shape to have an actual wrestling match. He was smart, and when he walked away from full-time, competition, I guess you could say, from being a full-time worker, his last match with The Rock, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful retirement match, just the way everything went and the fact that it was with his greatest rival. And
I hate to see. I know that I know the wrestling business, they have to keep the winner going. You pay your dues by honoring the winner on the way out. But I didn't like seeing Stone Cold get slammed with 3 rock bottoms. Like, I was kind of like, all right, man, you made your point, Rock. I get it. You're so much better. I don't know. I remember, man, I actually hated The Rock for a week or two after that.
Yeah, that was Hollywood Rock too. Like, that was, that time of wrestling is my favorite time. They call it the ruthless aggression era, but you're right. And it's all open to interpretation, but I guess it's just kind of like, you're right. Like, for me as a wrestler, and like putting myself in the other wrestlers' shoes versus what I thought as a fan back then, like watching it on TV every Monday, the way I thought then versus the way I think now is a lot different. I guess you can liken it to, being in the audience for a magic show and then becoming the magician yourself.
Yeah.
That it kind of ruins the act a little bit, becoming a wrestler, but you gain a new appreciation for it. And you also gain a better understanding of what goes into entertaining people. And the thing that I'm seeing right now is that there's a lot of stuff happening in wrestling that should have happened years ago. That didn't happen because of politics and because of money and because of just differences and because of whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I think I just read that Shawn Michaels on Monday announced he's coming out of retirement, and he probably had the most perfect retirement match against The Undertaker and left his career perfectly. And he actually stuck to his guns. And I think there's something to be said about that. A lot of people who die, especially if they were famous celebrities, they become bigger because they're not accessible anymore. They're not there anymore. There is no chance of them returning. Wrestling should be like that. If you say you're done and your last match was crap, especially, or you didn't perform up to the standards of yourself or the people, or you didn't deliver, or it just didn't come off the way it should, all those things, and you say you're done, you should stay done. The reason being is because there are more people who are capable of filling your spot eventually, not replacing you. No one can replace The Undertaker. The Undertaker is a legend. It's just when you do everything at the end of your match to make it look like you're retired, you put your hat in the middle of the ring, you put your gloves in the middle of the ring, your coat, and you walk away, and it's a beautiful thing, and it leaves everyone feeling like, wow, there's closure. Now I can really celebrate The Undertaker and really enjoy him. And then he comes back and does a crap little match against John Cena and does an even bigger embarrassment match against Goldberg and this long drawn out 48-minute match against Triple H in Australia, all this crap. It's kind of like, man, like, it's very obvious why you're doing it at this point. It's for the money, which is the only reason why any of us ever do this or ever got into this in the first place, was for money. That's the only reason why our industry exists, is for money. How did they get more people to come watch two dudes laying on each other at a carnival? Well, they had to start fixing it. Yeah. And it makes you wonder if they're doing that in other things as well, to get more people to watch. Who knows? I'm not making any claims. It's just a nice, interesting thing to think about, because if wrestling started it in the early 1900s and there's so many industries following what wrestling started, especially UFC, they copied,
they're blending
WWE's like pay-per-view formula, word, to a T.
Yeah,
they do pay-per-view and better than WWE does now. They do matchmaking and fight hypes way better than WWE does, and because they copied what WWE started doing. So now you see Ric Flair in there doing it for the money when he doesn't need the money.
Rick might have blown his money. If he,
I'd like to think that guy's getting tons of royalties still from all sorts of things. Like, that guy was he's very popular.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, on one hand, it's great to see Stone Cold come back and give a stunner to Kevin Owens or whatever. On the other, it's just like, man, like, I remember when you went in there and literally kicked ass and with a broken neck. It didn't matter, but that's because, it was a different time, it was a different mentality. And now there's this washed up version of Stone Cold coming on TV who probably could have still had an actual match, but is worried he's going to get hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, same thing with Hulk Hogan every time he showed up again. And it's like, dude, like, there are other people waiting to try to attain greatness in this business. And they're being held back by these guys that won't go away.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So on one hand, it is good for the fans to give them what they want, but on the other, who's a current wrestler right now that you think of immediately, like you did when someone said The Rock or Stone Cold? Oh yeah, I know who those guys are. When someone said Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, oh yeah, I know who those guys are. Who's a wrestler that's wrestling right now that someone could say his name and you'd be like, oh yeah, I know who that is?
Yeah, it's hard. No, it's we're talking about level of stardom and stuff, but it goes back to like what you mentioned earlier about it's addictive. Like, it's no different than any form of power or whatever. When you get it, you don't want to leave it because that's the highlight of your life. Like, what is better than after that? And it's hard for people to accept, well, I still got so many years to live and, oh, maybe I should share the spotlight and whatnot. But, they just can't, it's that's why, life is, it's very hard sometimes to realize how it's like, man, I got to get a bit more ruthless if I even want to have a chance of being seen. I mean, because like everyone who's into wrestling knows like part of, well, it's not just wrestling. Everywhere is politicking. Like half of why you're even able to get whatever is politicking. That's why everyone hated Hulk Hogan for a while, because behind the scenes, like Vince McMahon honestly had your mentality as far as saying like, hey, we want to give more people a try, more of this. Like he was trying to weed out Hulk Hogan back in the 90s, but he just kept politicking and then maneuvering around in pop culture and media to the point where it's like, all right, we'll work with this. But everyone knows that Vince always wanted to like steer it more towards eventually what Shawn Michaels is doing, and things like that. Like you wanted like actual wrestling again, like moves, like this and that, not just 4 moves from a big old dude or whatever. But yeah. But Cody, hold on. Like you mentioned 2 seconds ago that you're like, oh, they all got into wrestling for money, right? But you like is that the end goal? Like you want to hit that superstardom mark, or like there's got to be a party that just loves doing it, right? Like I mean,
so yeah, like. Like anybody who's gotten into wrestling in the last, I'd say 20 years, got into it because they grew up watching it. They were a fan, aka a mark. That's the name of the fans.
Yeah, I'm definitely
marks. And the reason why is because it's a con, and the people coming to pay are the marks. They're the marks. They're the ones who with the money, and they're the ones we put their money in our pockets, or the promoter does. And the promoter pays us and all this, right? So anyone that isn't honest enough to admit that like, okay, the end goal in this business is money. And it sounds greedy, but really like,
dude, it makes sense.
What's any job in the end, right?
Yeah,
I get a ton of satisfaction entertaining people. That is the number one reason kind of why I do what I do. And you have to find a reason other than money. Yeah. Because on the level I'm at, there is no money.
Well,
the promoters aren't smart enough to make big money. And then a lot of them like will fuck you over anyways on what they owe you. Like it's ruthless. And it's because they aren't handling their business properly. It's because most of these promoters barely are educated people, to be honest with you. A lot of the promoters I work for are like, they're not very smart people, to put it nicely. So yeah, like you have to have another reason other than money if you want to survive and keep doing this and not go crazy and not burn yourself out and not become disillusioned with the whole thing and not become just completely fed up. Because you are absolutely right. There is more politicking in pro wrestling than in anything I've ever seen. Generally, oh, dude, like
that is the game. It's
on the level that I'm at. Generally, if a guy has a belt, it's not because he's the best or the most liked or the most over or the safest worker, or it's because he squawks to the promoter enough and somehow convinced that promoter that he's the guy and there's no one else that can do what he does, and all this crap. It's all lies. It's all a bunch of smoke and mirrors, just like the business itself. Yeah, people call it fake. It's not fake. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of shit we do in the ring that if I were to do to just the average person on the street, they wouldn't like it. It might not hurt them or kill them, but they wouldn't like it.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel nice.
Yeah, that fake thing is not what people mean when they this isn't a real fight. But I'm like, okay, dude, like of course it's not a real fight, but it's like that's not what they're saying. Like I'm just like I have to correct them too. I'm like, well, what do you mean by fake? Like is an action movie? Is this look at like an action movie? You know what I mean? That's what we're doing here. Now the moves they do are like they're real, like getting slammed, getting chopped in the chest, especially when you see the way the ring is and everything. But yeah, but Cody, I want to talk a little bit quickly about your wrestling style. I noticed because so I was at your show, in RCW 2 years ago, I think, and I was just YouTubing some of your matches that were up in the last year. So like your style, I noticed it has you have almost like a slow build to it, right? Like that's kind of like what I've noticed. Is that something you do on purpose? Because you got your Rey Mysterios who fly around everywhere. Then you got your like back in the day Ultimate Warrior who's basically looks like as a grown up now, I'm like, my God, that looks like a cokehead running out there just like losing his mind.
He wasn't too far from the truth of what he was doing in those days. Same with Logan and all those guys. They were
those interviews.
Feeling the power, brother. Like that handshake between Hogan and Macho Man, they probably just went and did a mountain of blow before doing that. Like I'm telling you, they were partying like rock stars in those days. So and everyone is very well aware of the drug abuse in pro wrestling. People want to blame steroids, but no, man, like steroids are the least worst thing. Like when you're doing ounces of coke every night or taking all sorts of crazy prescription drug pills, steroids are the least of your problems. With respect to style, so it's not exactly like, okay, so it depends on who you're trained by. It depends on who you are in relation to other workers. In the big scheme of things, I would be considered a medium-sized wrestler. I'm 6'1", 6'2", anywhere from 200 to 220 pounds I've been in the ring. Mm-hmm. I was about I got up to about 220 a couple of months ago because I was just eating a ton of food and lifting really heavy again, and just a bunch of size came back, but it wasn't all like muscle. But my style, it depends on if you watch me, if I'm a face or a heel, so a good guy or a bad guy. Mm-hmm. If you see my matches where I'm a heel, there's a formula you follow, and that's kind of how all of us can work together without having to meet a week earlier and practice everything over and over and over and write out everything like some wrestlers have done. Mm-hmm. But the whole art of what we do is to show up, and what makes a really good pro wrestler or a well-trained pro wrestler is you can work with anybody and have a passable match, and both of you go home in at least as good a condition as what you went in before. Okay. Mm-hmm. So my style, if you see me working as a heel, which I've been mostly a heel for most of my career, I was a face as Crude Oil Cody Mac for a bit. And then they turned me heel this year because I started training with Johnny Devine at Canadian Strong Style Academy. And we're all part of this group called the Strong Style Assassins. And stuff like that. And they he kind of changed my gimmick for me a little bit. So I'm not really Crude Oil Cody Mac right now. I think, what did he call Mac Daddy Cody Mac, which is like,
is that it? Okay. I don't know. Like Crude Oil. I love
that. So yeah, now when you know if you're heel or face, then you can determine how you work and who you want to emulate, because it's all been done before. Good luck trying to come up with a unique offense that actually works, that makes sense, because it's all been done before. There's nothing original in wrestling anymore. And if anyone wants to pretend like they're super original and all this, no, they're just taking something someone else did and kind of rehashing it their own way and all this shit. So when you see me with my build-up style, there is a rhyme and a reason to how I work, and it has to do with how you in the audience perceive me and what you can take in. Rey Mysterio is one of the greatest of all time. Not because of the moves he can do, but when he chooses to do them and how he does them. If you watch his matches closely, especially some of his better ones, it's not just two dudes doing a bunch of moves. There's a reason why. And a lot of the psychology, that's what it's called, the match psychology, you follow a video game mentality, okay? So both wrestlers start off, they have their energy bar full. And as they go through the match, that energy bar starts depleting, right?
Yeah.
And generally in a wrestling video game, if you don't have enough energy or stamina, or if your special combo meter isn't full enough, you can't pull off your finishers, or you can't pull off your special moves or whatever. So that mentality actually translates very well to the ring. So as a bad guy, I have to kind of get my ass kicked first in the ring. People need to know that, okay, I'm not as good as the guy I'm wrestling that everyone should be cheering for. So there's multiple ways to accomplish it, but it's called the shine of the match, and that's to get the babyface over more with the fans. Now, WWE, they don't always have to do this because a lot of their guys are over as they're ever going to be just on their entrance alone. So they can start off hot, and that's why people get confused, and it's called a hot start, because they're not going to get any more over with their offense unless if no one's ever seen them. But you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I mean. And like, that's it. Hulk Hogan had a very limited offense. He didn't really do a lot of moves, but the thing was, is Hogan got so over that all he had to do was come out, tear the t-shirt off. Everyone went crazy. And then he could just start punching away and all this stuff and rock and rolling.
Yeah.
Whereas if nobody knows a Cody Mac from a hole in the ground in most places. I haven't gotten my name out there enough. So if you're going to watch me, I have to show you what I'm all about, whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy. So if you see me as a bad guy, I'm probably going to get my ass kicked for a bit in the shine. And then I'm going to find a way to get a one-up on the guy I'm wrestling, which is called the cutoff. And that either involves cheating some way or outsmarting him some way based on our characters.
Yeah.
And then I get my heat, which is my opportunity to kick the guy's ass. And that's my time to get my shine in.
Yeah.
And then there's the turnaround, which is a way for the baby face to figure out, well, how to re-overcome me. And then there is the basically the finish, which involves a lot of, like false finishes, like, oh, I hit a big move. Is it over? No. He hits a big move. Is it over? No. And it adds more drama and suspense. And then you have, whoever wins or whoever doesn't win or whatever, and how that goes down. A lot of indie wrestlers on my level, they get that confused and they start just going ham and they start doing all sorts of stupid shit and they start doing all sorts of stupid moves and they do all these moves one after another. And then you in the audience go, what the hell just happened?
Cody, you're
I missed that.
I completely didn't realize when you broke it down just now the way you did. It makes complete sense, because I remember when I was that night at the RCW match, like when I saw your match, there was a logic to it. Like you came out first. It's kind of like, and you were Crude Oil, and again, I love that gimmick. I just think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
But and like we all call you Crude Oil. No one calls you Cody.
Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah. And like there was a rhyme and reason, like a build up. You're right. Like kind of, because again, like what makes a bad guy a bad guy? The bad guy usually is an insecure kind of guy who comes out like, I probably can't beat him, so I just gotta get in his face and piss him off and blah blah blah. And then he looks
or cheat.
Like the good guy's always the stoic, take the high road guy kind of. And but you were right, because there were some matches that made no sense. Like I watched a guy do I forget who it was. Again, I don't want to sandbag him too much, because there's things I like about some wrestlers, but there was a couple high flyer guys. They didn't turn that up and down battle like more realistic. It was like one guy did all these super moves that, if it's a video game analogy, that should have took half your life bars. The next minute, the guy just gets back up. But I'm like, you're not Hulk Hogan. You're not hulking up. Like, it's kind of like, this could use some work, right? But although the moves were fancy, the storytelling was way off,
Exactly.
Yeah, and I can tell.
And my experience is, everyone I've talked to, and even myself growing up, I don't care what happens if there is a really good story being told, and that's kind of the same for everybody else. If you understand what's going on, if you understand why these two guys hate each other, if you understand why they're doing the moves they do at the times they do, it is a way more enjoyable experience.
Oh, yeah. No, that's everything.
Any form of entertainment. If you go watch Game of Thrones and they're just kind of like, oh, random sex and random dick here and, oh, no dragon still and, oh, crying for no reason and all this crap, you go, what the hell is this episode? This episode sucked. But when the story is properly laid out, oh, these guys are going to war against each other, and oh, this person slept with this person, so now this person hates them, and all this crap, all that drama builds up, and then the dragons finally show up or whatever. It's great.
Yeah.
People love it.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember people criticizing the end of that series and going, well, and it's because, well, they rushed it and they didn't tell a good enough story that people wanted to see. And that's the thing. Sometimes just giving the people what they want to see is enough. You don't have to like swerve them. You don't have to like have certain surprises. Sometimes just like, yeah, it makes sense that this guy and this guy don't like each other because of this reason, and we want to see them duke it out. And that's the problem with pro wrestling sometimes is there's too many guys, too many promoters, too many companies who are trying to reinvent the wheel when it doesn't need to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. And it's like, yeah, it's super interesting. Because again, it's just like in MMA right now. There's a lot of great MMA fights. Like I'm a huge MMA fanatic, by the way.
Yep.
But the ones that get the most people caring are the ones you get emotionally invested in. Where like you're like, hey, why do these guys hate each other? Like, what's going on there? You know, and they may not be really the best fighter, but you start to care about them. You see a little bit of yourself in them, and that's what draws you in to it. You know, and I also notice going back to that show that I was there was one character, Sexy Steve Rivers. Like, So like off the jump, I never met this guy. I don't know what he's doing, but like it was the peak of the US election. So his gimmick was, he's a Trump supporter, right? So he comes out and he looks like Butterbean and he has like these big American shorts. And I just remember first thing he did was he looked at the crowd. He's like, 4 more years. 4 more years. Yeah. Right when he said that, I looked around and I could just see like people who hate Trump, like, oh, like fuck this guy. Like right away you give a shit more, right? And then versus if you just don't know anything about the other two and why are you fighting and whatever. Like some gimmicks are just so smooth, like, and it just pops just like that. Like Sexy Steve Rivers, like, we want to see him get his ass kicked.
A huge difference though is that the guys on my level don't understand is there are no TV cameras to help get us over. So a lot of people who watch wrestling, they underestimate how much just being on a national TV show and having ring announcers doing commentary, those two things help get wrestlers over immensely. And those two things help explain things to people in the audience pretty easily. When you don't have those, it's up to you to show and not tell. Yeah. That is a famous cliche in wrestling, and anyone who can abide by that becomes more successful than not. If everything you do is to show people and not try to tell, you get your shit across a lot easier and people become more invested. So Steve Rivers did a very good job showing people his gimmick and not telling. He didn't have to tell anyone or explain anything. He came out dressed in American garb, 4 more years at the right topical time. And I'm surprised that people booed him as much as they did in Alberta because there's a lot of Trump supporters here, right? Yeah, oh yeah. We're supposed to be and that's the thing though, politics. So politics is always topical, and that'll always get a rise out of people. And that's the goal, is to get a reaction. If you're not getting a reaction in wrestling, you're a terrible wrestler. Yeah. Oh yeah. So when people wanted to criticize John Cena for all those years, he was the best wrestler because he got the biggest reactions, whether it was boos or cheers or both at the same time. Like, he did something right. Yeah. The thing is on my level, if you come out and, you can have the best entrance music, you can have the best ring attire, you can look like the best, but if you come out there and just take a giant shit in the ring and no rhyme or reason in what you do, and you do all the opposite stuff of what people are expecting you to do, all this stuff, you fall flat on your face. And exactly as you said, you'll go, well, you probably won't be remembered by people in the audience.
Yeah, like the human attention span is it's a weird thing, but if you can get it, there's absolutely a way to do it. Like, you know, like for instance, like Donald Trump, he has his way of getting attention because he will just simplify things so you can kind of understand what's going on. You know, like he calls Joe Biden Sleepy Joe. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, okay, this is like an old dude who's like not ready to perform or whatever. But yeah, no, I want to go to your crude oil gimmick for a second there, because like I don't know, I like as an Albertan, like I'm like I just appreciated it, like the hell out of that thing, like, you know, it was so over the top, you know, like so quick question, like do you actually worked in the rigs or?
Yeah, so I went up north for the first time in 2018. I was there all year, and like I said, I in preparation for wrestling training, and I was able to, you know, pay off a lot of bills and sock away a lot of money. Well, not a lot, but enough, I guess, to kind of like give me enough room to be able to, you know, pursue my career. Because there are a lot of people, they get trained and then they just go back to work and they don't really, you know, put themselves out there to get involved in shows. I chose to put myself out there right away, and I worked like just about every RCW show that they had that year in 2019. I probably had my first year. Like, if you get over 50 matches in your first year in Canada, that's really good. And I had way more than that. Like, I was used on every show. And then up until January 2020, and my brother passed away. And so I took time off. But then, like, 2 months after that, the pandemic started and everything shut down anyways. And I was up north again for that. And I got trapped up north for like 6 weeks straight doing 6-1s. And that's when I came up with the Crude Oil Cody Mac gimmick, kind of. Because as you pointed out with Steve Rivers, he had a very topical gimmick at that time. Being a Trump supporter, being an American patriot supporter, all that. And at the time it was, you know, like fall 2020 when it was Biden and Trump duking it out over, you know, who's the least corrupt person, really.
Yeah.
Which the wrong guy got voted in for that, in my opinion. But once again, that's politics, which there's too much of that in wrestling. But I was up north, and I asked everybody up there what they thought of the gimmick. Like, it's not like I just, like, arbitrarily did it and, like, thought it was – like, I asked a lot of guys on the patch what they thought. And I said, dude, I know, like, maybe you're not into wrestling. That's fair. But if you were to see a wrestler come out dressed like this, acting like this, doing this stuff in the ring – what would you think? Be honest with me. And I said, you can tell me I'm a fucking idiot if you want. And a lot of guys told me, no, that's funny. That's good. That's good stuff. And so I figure, okay, well, I've got a very topical gimmick in Alberta. And it's like, you know, normally when you choose like a gimmick where you're doing a profession, like, you know, garbage man or hockey player or whatever, they don't really work. But I was like, well...
And then
it depends. Like, right, and generally, like my gimmick, if they had come up with my gimmick in the WWE first and gave it to somebody there, he would have been a joke character. He would have been a jobber.
Yeah.
Right, and the thing is at first when I came up with the gimmick, I was like, well, should I just call myself the blue collar jobber? Because like, are they going to job me out? But I'm like, no. I feel like there's a way I can do this where I can showcase a lot of charisma, personality, and that it's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm a guy working on the patch, but it's like, but I'm coming, like, I work on the patch, but I like to kick people's asses on Friday nights as a wrestler. And so, you know, you saw the gimmick where it's like, okay, I had, I guess you can say a traditional, like, wrestling attire where it's like kind of like the singlet part and then long tights. And over trunks over my long tights. So it's kind of like I tried to combine some old school aspects to it, as well as, you know, like, okay, like what is the gimmick? And, you know, if I was wearing my blue and my black attire, I looked like I had modified like coveralls into a jumpsuit. When I wore my red, a lot of people thought I was like a fireman or something because it was red and yellow, which is a common color for coveralls up north. Like the company I worked for, OCL, they're red and yellow. So it's not always blue and yellow or black and yellow. But I figured like, okay, like I'm an Alberta guy. I did work in the patch. Like I'm probably going to go back up there again now that they're looking for people and they've relaxed a ton of these bullshit rules and all that. A guy's got to eat, and it is good money. It's just like, I don't know. A lot of people around here seem to be afraid to pull the trigger. And I did get, I guess you can say, later on in the pandemic, especially when the vax stuff started coming up, I got a lot of negative attention for that. And, a lot of people assume, well, because I'm an Alberta oil and gas guy, that, I'm just this hardline anti-vaxxer, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's not true. But I am completely against what is going on right now, because it's not for the reasons why they pretend it is. I can see through the bullshit, just like a ton of other Albertans, but I don't know. So, like, I don't know. It was kind of weird. And then, like, I feel like my gimmick just got changed on me recently, and it's probably for the better. I do have more fun as a heel, but I thought I was just scratching the surface as a face, as Crude Oil Cody Mac. I don't know. I thought I was pretty over. I didn't get to sell a lot of merch doing it. I don't know. So,
dude, I love the crude oil thing, and I think you can bring it back whenever. Like, it doesn't have to be a face. And you raise an interesting point, because if it's on WWE stage right now, you're right. It looks like a cartoon gimmick character that should have been in the 90s, right? Where remember Bob Holly was a race car driver. And I get that. But as far as the regional scene, it's perfect, man, because it's like it literally draws in, because Alberta, we have our kind of isolation to with the rest of the country, and this is like a symbol almost, right? And it is comical, but at the same time, the way you did the character, and I didn't think it was like silly. Like, I literally thought it was like, oh, this is like just a hardcore oil and gas rig guy who just has a violent streak, and he's also like Albertan. When you're like, what was your one interview? You're talking about like, oh, I'm wrestling Tits McGee and whatever else. So
yeah.
Because you're talking like a rugged, like you're literally crude oil, as in you're crude, like you're like also like a crude Albertan, and like I got the gimmick, and I like the style, because when you're wrestling, you didn't come off like a joke character. You came off actually like just a hardcore right wing Albertan kind of guy, and when you had that big wrench around you all the time, like, is he going to fucking use that? Because that might actually kill someone.
Well, and that was the thing. I thought I had enough layers and aspects to my gimmick that there was something that could be done with me, with anybody in any situation, anything like that wrench. I actually never used that wrench against anybody, and people so badly wanted to see me do it. The reason being is because, as a good guy, why am I going to use weapons against people? If I'm playing by the rules, I wouldn't use the weapon I bring to the ring with me. But the thing is it was something for heels to use against me, and some of them did use them against me, did use that wrench against me. Now, the whole thing is there's buildups and payoffs in wrestling, right? Just like TV shows. So say if, like, your favorite character, every episode is fucked with by the bad guy some way, somehow, and the bad guy seems to get away with it. Well, there's got to be a big payoff in the end where the good guy finally gets to give it to that bad guy and pay him back for all the shit he did to him and all the shit he took and all this, right? So I figure, okay, well, if these promoters around here could actually get a brain and do proper booking and get me involved in a good enough storyline that has the backing of the company, there's so many layers to what could have been done. And there could have been, like, whoever I was feuding with could have hit me with that wrench every time they were in the ring with me. And then finally, the match of, no rules or a weapons match or whatever could be used. And I could pummel the crap out of them with my wrench. And people would pay to see that because the buildup was there. Yeah. But unfortunately, you're left to the wolves in this province a lot when it comes to storytelling and booking. And there were a lot of times I had to fight for what I had, like, just to get what I did get. When you go out there and literally everyone in the audience is chanting your name the whole entire friggin' match, no matter what you do, every time you're out there, and they still won't put a belt on you, it does become a little discouraging, a little disheartening.
Yeah.
you know, and it makes you wish that, well, okay, like, is what I'm doing actually working? And so, you know, I really do appreciate your kind words, because the way you described that gimmick back to me is kind of everything I was hoping everyone would understand.
Oh, dude.
And you're right. I could bring it back. I don't know. It's tough, because I did get a lot of negative flack on the internet for when those vaccines came out and shit. So,
but look, like, the whole, people are fickle, all right? And people change their minds all the time. Like, I get what the crude oil gimmick's about. And like, I always, for some reason, pictured, because there's a lot of oil and gas conventions and stuff. I'm like, dude, couldn't you guys just have like found a way to integrate like a fun kind of like, hey, like, there's a wrestling match and you get crude oil coming out, like, you know, like, I love oil and gas on you or something like that. Like, you know, and then you literally pummel someone who's like, again, I'm just talking here, people, but you know, you got like a flamboyant kind of woke kind of character coming out or something, right? Like, you know, and then like, I mean, just that alone, like, it again is why like people love wrestling, because wrestling has this element of like comedy, satire, drama, action, and everything like that. And I gotta be honest with you, I didn't realize your crude oil character was supposed to be like a pure face. I thought he was a bit of like, just like I thought he was a little bit of a heel in a weird way, kind of like.
Well, it wasn't. Like, here's the thing. Like, when I was like, yeah, I'm coming back. Like, so mid 2020. Like, so when I decided I was coming back after my hiatus and stuff, and after I came back from up north and all that, I was like, okay, I'm coming back with a new gimmick. And like I said, I had to fight at first to kind of get like, I don't know, like, I think there were people that thought my gimmick wasn't going to work, that, you know, I think like one of the promoter for RCW didn't really believe in it. I don't know. He didn't put a lot of effort into like hyping up my return. So the thing is luckily I'm pretty good with technology and video editing, and I edited up a couple of promos that showcased my gimmick better than anything that any promoter could have done for me in this province. And I think like getting that out there helped a lot. And so it was kind of really like the organic crowd reaction I got. People just started cheering me. They didn't boo me when I came out. And I think, you know, you can kind of dictate how people receive you with how you act and the energy you put out there. And I just put like some really like crazy high voltage energy out there. And I think a lot of people during that time, during the pandemic, really kind of gravitated towards that. And that, you know, it was like, I guess you could say just a shot in the arm where, you know, like you're right, there was a bit more of a rugged aspect to me, but I was a pure face at first. Like, that's the way I was being booked. And the company, like the promotions needed it. A good face, like a face that actually gets like the crowd to cheer from, and like it makes the heel's job so much easier. And so, and there's not, but the thing is, you got to really put yourself out there. You have to get people to like you as a face, and it's hard, and it's kind of scary sometimes. And like, you know, it did trigger my anxiety a whole shit ton. Like, there is a video of me out there puking like violently in the middle of a ring from my anxiety. I had an anxiety attack in the middle of the match. I thought it was bad Tim Hortons. I thought I was like gassing or something. And I ended up seeing a therapist, and they told me, no, like, that was a massive anxiety attack you had.
Jesus.
Yeah, man, it was a rough day at the office. And that was a year ago, like either this month or last month. It was like a year ago that happened. And I kind of thought I was like, my career was done after that. Like, I'm like, man, there's video of this that got put all over the internet. Like, and I told you about Rene Dupree, and we actually showed that video on his podcast, which is doing very well. If you want to check out a very fun and entertaining wrestling podcast, check out Rene Dupree's podcast. Oh, yeah, it's pretty good.
You will.
And yeah, like I said, so an episode, it would have been from a year ago. We talked about that. But the thing is, you know, Renee was nice about it, and it was more so to showcase, like, this ain't no joke. Like, you know, you might think, oh, we get hurt, all this shit. But no, literally, you can just spew your guts out in the middle of a ring, and it's a bad night. You know what I mean? And then I ended up working for a different rival company for a little bit after that ended up screwing me over. And then I went back to RCW early this year for a bit. And then just, you know, I haven't really had the best year. It's been a pretty tough year for me. I had to move to Medicine Hat. So that's why I've only been wrestling for PPW. I don't have a vehicle right now. They tell you need 3 things when you start wrestling. You need a cell phone. You need a way to get around. So it's usually a car. And then you do need some money. You do need a job. Like you need a way to be able to fund your career. And, you know, those 3 things have been sort of not easy for me to have this year. Like I said, I don't have a vehicle, so I can't get out of Medicine Hat. The other side of the business, a lot of people don't tell you about that I've learned this year is the professional jealousy.
Oh,
so, well, dude, so like when I came down here, I talked to the one other wrestler that I know that lives here. There's only one other wrestler that lives here in Medicine Hat. And I tried to talk with him and say, hey man, let's be road buddies. Like, let's travel together, you know, like gas money, all that stuff, whatever. I'll pay it. I don't care. Like, you know, let's try to get booked together back in Calgary. And I already knew this guy was wrestling in Lethbridge, and I already knew that he'd be able to give me rides to Lethbridge. But I ended up finding out that he was taking bookings in Calgary with RCW, like not telling me, and only he was going there.
Because he didn't want you up there. He wanted. Yeah.
And like I said, I'm pretty sure he's got some sour grapes because the CWE promoter chose me to face Chris Masters and not him. But when you look at me and you look at him, you go, okay, like, I'm sorry to say, but like when all the hours of sweat and pain and agony that I put into my training and I put into the gym just to be able to have arms that look like this, which aren't really that big, but his are just flat.
Yeah.
But he's a skinny, fat dude. And he, you know what I mean? And and I don't know, but it's just like, this is the problem, is that you think the biggest lesson I have learned this year is you could do everything right. You could have a good gimmick. You could cut the best promos. You could have one of the best physiques in any locker room you go to. And it still ain't good enough, because if people just don't like you, or if they're jealous of you, or if whatever, you know what I mean? It doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Like there's an element of, when it comes to that line of work, and it's not even just wrestling, entertainment period. Like there isn't like an it factor thing. You don't know why someone just gravitates more to the eye, right? Because think about it. Like, do you think Justin Bieber is the most talented musician? I do like some Bieber stuff, by the way, but still, like, why is he the most famous? There's just something about him, because there's 20 other guys coming out. Like, he wasn't the only kid that came out and put a YouTube song out, but something about him, like the it factor thing, unfortunately, is it's an unpredictable factor, you know, and sometimes some people just subjective. Sometimes some people just have that. It's timing. It's maybe, I mean, some people might be like, oh, it's God's plan or like destiny or whatever. But some of that you can't predict, you know. But yeah. Okay, so Cody,
they say to have the it factor. So sorry to backtrack here, but when it comes to what people look for for a wrestler, okay, and this is literally from my trainer, Lance Storm, his mouth. And he worked for WCW, ECW, WWF. He was an Intercontinental champion. Like this guy is no joke. He's regarded as one of the best trainers in the world. And he's actually currently working for Impact as a producer. He said, there's the 3 things, okay? There's your look, there's your charisma, and there's your athleticism, okay? Generally, if you have 2 of the 3 things, you're employable by almost anybody. However, if those 2, what they're looking for, the 2 things out of the 3, that's the subjective part. And it's the flavor of the week shit. They could be looking for a guy that's 7 feet tall and 300 pounds jacked, but they don't care if he can't talk, and they don't care if he's not the most athletic guy, because they think that they can teach him that stuff. Or they could be looking for someone who can literally like get anybody hyped for anything. with any promo they cut, but he could be just like the smallest, most pathetic looking dude and not have an athletic bone in his body, but they'll pay him tons of money because that's what they're looking for. So the thing is then there's the it factor on that. Generally, the it factor is if you have all three. And there is something above that. Like The Rock has the it factor. He always had the it factor. And plus, it did help that he was the son of our already famous WWF wrestler from the 70s or 80s. Mm-hmm. But he ended up having the it factor. That guy's like 6'5", 250 pounds all the time at least, jacked, athletic as hell, and oodles of charisma. And look at where he is. He's the highest paid actor in Hollywood now. Mm-hmm. But the problem, though, is there have been so many of those people who have had all three and the it factor, and they still get swept under the rug because of politics and because just they didn't have enough people believe in them, and they didn't have the right platform to elevate them. You want to talk about Justin Bieber? Yeah, he ain't the most talented guy out there. He's probably not even in the top 50 for talent when it comes to his profession, but he had the right marketing machine behind him. He had the right people behind him, and he had enough people believe in him. And his target audience as well. He knew his target audience. Now the guy is, well, I think everyone knows what's happened to him. He's half of his face is fucking paralyzed because of those jabs. Like he's not doing well now, poor guy. Mm-hmm. But that's an unforeseen thing now, but it's just like exactly as you said, like he ain't the most talented, but he was one of the most popular for sure.
Mm. Yeah.
It's just fickle.
It is fickle. And I mean, you bring up all those criteria, but sometimes I think it's even simpler than that. So like, this sounds kind of like a weird example, but it's like you go to a pet store and you end up choosing out like there's 20 dogs, because you want to go get a dog that day. And then there's just one that resonates with you. You know what it is. It just is, and then there's 20 other people might walk by and say, no, the other dog's cuter or whatever. But that one ends up being your puppy, right? It's like, I don't know what it is with wrestling. Sometimes I knew Shawn Michaels for me was going to be awesome before I even knew what he was doing. Like there was just something about, I remember like the earlier days, because I didn't start to become a Shawn Michaels fan until after he left Marty Jannetty and everything. Like there's just something about one time he walked out. This is when his hair stopped being the mullet. Yeah. And then I don't know what it was. I just knew right away. I'm like, dude, like I'm probably gonna like this wrestler. And then he just fulfilled everything else. And I had the same effect with Stone Cold, and like just for whatever reason, once he shaved his head and he got rid of that ringmaster thing. It was just the moment he came on screen, I was like, "Who's this guy?" That's what that factor must be. Yeah, one of the hardest things, because you can't control that. It's like you put yourself out there, you do your best, but there is an element of just that thing, right? Like, I mean,
well, the reason why those two gimmicks in particular work, and like exactly what you said, like you hit the nail on the head. Those two wrestlers were everything that the fans thought they were going to be. But here's the thing. Shawn Michaels, when he was in the Rockers with Marty Jannetty, and they were a tag team and they both had to share the limelight together, and people weren't sure which one of the two was the more, like, most people thought Marty Jannetty at first was like going to be the successful one. They thought he was the better of the two. And that's what I mean. Like, they were in a tag team together, and, there were people who were leaning more towards Jannetty. But then the company said, well, no, the guy is Shawn, and that has to do with all the backstage shit and politics. And the company gave him the platform to showcase what he can really do. Shawn Michaels is not much different than Michael Hickenbottom, which is the real man behind Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
And they say this is a concept in wrestling. They say you take who you are and dial yourself up to 11. That's generally how a good gimmick is made. Mm-hmm. That's what they did with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He wasn't the ringmaster and Stunning Steve and all this shit with the Hollywood Blondes. He is more like Stone Cold Steve Austin, taking ATVs, drinking beer, hunting, fishing, not giving a fuck. That is Stone Cold. So the reason why Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold worked is because they were given the platform to practically be a bigger, more animated version of themselves, and they really connected with people. Mm-hmm. And you connected with Shawn Michaels because I'm sure like any guy will connect with that flamboyant but cocky, charismatic, like comfortable in his own skin and doesn't give a shit what you think of him guy. Yeah, which there was a lot of aspects to that to Stone Cold, but Stone Cold was more rugged and represented the blue collar workers and represented the people who always wanted to kick the shit out of their boss.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and that's why people are confused about Stone Cold too. They think, oh, he's not a good guy or a bad guy. No, he's one of the biggest good guys of all time. Everybody cheered him. But just because he went out there and he kicked ass and didn't have his ass kicked a lot, people get confused. But it's like, look at all the Hollywood movies. You know, everyone loves Captain America because he kicks ass. People love Spider-Man because he kicked ass. Like, that's the new good guy, going out and kicking ass. It's not, hi, I'm here to save the day, and I only fight with people who want to fight me, and I'm here to save the girl, and I'm meat and potatoes, and, you know, take your vitamins, say your prayers type bullshit. That's not a good guy anymore. Those days are long gone. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even Shawn Michaels, people ended up liking him just for being cocky and flamboyant because he was kicking ass.
Yeah, and so, you the point that you made about take who you are and dial it up to 10, that absolutely is like the magic ingredient, because why I love the characters I love or gravitate is because I can see they're being themselves. It's an authenticity thing, right? Yeah. Like, and I can tell Crude Oil, like that's Cody Mac in crude oil form, you know, and your humor and
pretty
stuff.
Much.
Like the humor.
It was me, or a big aspect of me taken and dialed up to 11. Cause like, I don't, you know, the what thing like that. I do use that in my vocabulary. I don't go what all the time, but I'm just like, are we going to go out there and do this or what? Like, that's a thing I picked up from up north. You know how many people say that up north? Yeah. You know, like calling people bud and just like my Alberta type kind of accent that comes out a little bit. That is me. But it's an aspect of me, and there is more to me than just that. But it's like I took that aspect and cranked it to 11. I'm not all about the patch. I don't love being in the oil patch, and I'm not one of those guys. But it has served me. I've been a part of it. It's part of who I am, and I took an aspect of who I was, and I turned it up to 11. And I think that's why it worked the way it did, but it is a slippery slope because it could, and there were some things I thought that came off as kind of like, that doesn't really work. And it's trial and error. But, you know, it's just like having the platform to be able to do that is the most important thing.
Okay. Cody, honestly, like I can talk to you forever about this, and I would love to talk to you some more. And but I'm gonna start to wind this down right now. We're at the hour 20 mark here. But so Cody, so just to because we talked about a lot today, I'm just my memory's a bit jumbled. Okay, so currently, who are you wrestling for then currently right now, and like what's your schedule now on that? Because we want to plug you and stuff, right? We want to tell people more of what.
I appreciate that.
In the show notes, we're gonna put all your Instagram and everything like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I might
appreciate
some links, some of your classic matches on YouTube and things. And but right now, who are you wrestling for? Like what's the next trajectory here? And how? And like, I mean, you're saying you're in great shape right now. So and like arms look stunning, by the way.
Thank you.
And, so take it away. Where are you at?
Okay, so right now I've only been wrestling for Pure Power Wrestling. They're based out of Lethbridge. Yeah. We actually just did a show at the NMAX Center on October 1st. And it was probably one of the largest independent wrestling shows in Alberta this year, if not in the last little bit. There was 700 people there at the NMAX Center. And it was a success. And the thing is the NMAX Center is a very popular venue. Like a lot of like concerts have happened there, and like WWE has even gone there back in the day, and you know, whatever. That venue wants Pure Power Wrestling to be in there and wants them to succeed. That's huge. So if you are located in Calgary or south of Calgary, the promotion to see is Pure Power Wrestling in Lethbridge, and they They don't come to Calgary, but they're in Lethbridge. They do their shows there. They do their shows in like Tabor, Fort McLeod, Valhall, all that stuff. Like they're all around in there, and you'll guaranteed see a show that tells clear stories. You'll guaranteed see a show that has over the top characters that are relatable and easy to understand. And you also won't see a lot of like really like, carny, just like cheap stuff. Like it is still more of a kid or family friendly show. Mm-hmm. So that's the promotion I've been wrestling for the last few months. I don't know when I'll be appearing for them again, to be honest with you. Okay. I don't know.
So right now your career essentially right now is a bit touch and go right now. Like
right now. Yeah. Cause like this year I've had a lot of big changes and I'm kind of, the position I'm in right now is I got to sort of worry about my personal life and get some things in order in my personal life to be able to once again get back to wrestling 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. When I'm wrestling 4 days a week, that's usually with Real Canadian Wrestling in Calgary and Edmonton. It's with Canadian Wrestling Elite when they come to Alberta. I do have plans to try to travel with them to other provinces. It's just in Canada, it's not easy to travel, as I mentioned before. I do have plans to get out to British Columbia and wrestle for the promotions out there. So there's Thrash, there's Big West, there's NEW, which is closer to the coast. There's a lot of wrestling there too. And that's actually like, it's a pretty good area to get noticed. So that is a goal of mine. And obviously to get out to Ontario too, because that's kind of a hotbed for wrestling right now as well. They have a saying, telephone, tell a wrestler, and tell a friend. That's generally like the three ways, you get booked in this industry. And they also say, don't go through the front door if you can go through the window. Mm-hmm. And generally you find a friend wrestler. I've made some connections with some wrestlers. Like, I hope I made enough of an impression on them. And I hope I've got enough of a backing from certain wrestlers as well, where I could, like, my goal is to be employed as a wrestler full time. Mm. So if, I don't have my sights set on, say, WWE per se. Like, there's a lot of other companies that will pay you good money to wrestle full time. Mm. Impact Wrestling, which is now based out of Canada, is probably, I'd say, like one of the most realistic goals that I have, because I've met quite a bit of wrestlers from their roster. My current trainer, Johnny Devine, used to work for them, so he knows even more people that work for that organization that I'm sure he could probably help get a word in for me, that sort of thing. But yeah, like once I get going, you'll see me at all the other wrestling promotions. There's a new wrestling company that I did work 2 shows for earlier this year. Big things coming from them. They have a show on the 28th, I think, at the Victoria Pavilion. It's Dungeon Wrestling, which is the spiritual successor to Stampede Wrestling.
Oh, okay.
And Bret Hart's kids run that promotion.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so they have the dungeon and they have the funding of all that. And like, they're bringing in really big names on the 28th. Like, I think they've got Nick Aldis. They've got Brian Pillman Jr. They've got Harry Smith, which is British Bulldog's son. They've brought in the Billington Bulldogs, which are the Dynamite Kid's nephews. Yeah. And like one of them looks just like the Dynamite Kid.
No way.
They're going to have some big things going on. They have also started a new wrestling company in Edmonton called Top Talent Wrestling. They're bringing in pretty big names. They put on a very, very high production value show. I'm actually very surprised to see how well of a show they're running. There is another wrestling promotion as well in Edmonton that started a year ago called Love Pro Wrestling. They do kind of the same thing that they've all like that. They put on all the same matches and they have all the same guys. And it's kind of like, how do I put this? That's like preschool or elementary school to like Dungeon Wrestlings and Top Talents Wrestlings, like high school or college. Like, you know what I mean? So you go there, you'll see, and same with RCW, like they're kind of like, there's a lot. I didn't think I'd ever say this. There's more wrestling in Alberta now than there's ever been. And there's actually more training schools in Alberta right now than there's ever been, because Storm Wrestling Academy closed down in 2019. So if you're looking to become a wrestler, you can go to Strong Style Wrestling Academy, Canadian Strong Style Wrestling Academy in Calgary. That's where I've been training, and that's with Johnny Devine. You could go to Workforce Training in Calgary, which is Chris Knight. He was the assistant trainer at Storm Academy. He helped train me. And then in Edmonton, there's Top Talent Training School, and then there's also Clandestine Training School, which they're good wrestling schools, and they've been getting a lot of media attention. So there's lots of wrestling in this province right now, and there's lots of wrestling training. So if anyone's looking to become a wrestler, if anyone's looking to see a good wrestling show, chances are on whatever Friday or Saturday night you want to go, there's going to be wrestling, whether it's in Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, or in between.
Dude, yeah, that's a lot of information you gave me here. For the audience, I'm gonna put this all in the show notes. I'm gonna give connections to each of these places for people to check out. And yeah, no, Cody, definitely sort through your stuff. I mean, I enjoyed your wrestling. I mean, like me and Cass, we're just bartenders, so our Fridays is usually when we work. That's the problem. But like, I had such a blast at that show. I was like, and like, I'm gonna catch more of those, especially when you're back in the ring and stuff like that too. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, but right now, like, you know, this is life. Everyone has things they got to sort out constantly. I mean, like all the power to you. Get through this hump here and get yourself back out there, man. Because obviously, like, I mean, I think you're talented, and like, I enjoyed the show we were at. I seriously hope you bring back Crude Oil. I think there's a place for that right now, and that gimmick can always be modified in so many different directions too. I mean, it's like you can go more like cartoon than more real than there's just, I don't know. I just personally really like that. I mean, I'm still going to be calling you Crude Oil amongst my friends and stuff.
Thank you. And I have no problem with that. Like I said, that gimmick, you're